So I'm originally from Turkey. I graduated from undergrad in Georgetown in 2014. I had studied, I was in the School of Foreign Service. I was majoring in international and political economics and did the certificate in international business diplomacy. After graduation, I started working at the World Bank right away. And just briefly, how I got that job was actually, I mean, my senior year, I was applying to like a countless number of jobs, I think. I was just sending my resume everywhere. And then one of my professors at a class I took in Georgetown, it was actually Professor Udumsov. He gave us like a piece of paper that says how to spam your way into the World Bank, and basically reaching out to people on topics that you worked on and you written reports on, and inviting them to have coffee or talk about their work. So I sent some emails to people in the World Bank, and we met with one person who was working on Turkey, which was my home country that I'd worked on. And I kind of got a job offer after that and started as a consultant. And then I became staff after that. I worked for a few years, did my master's at the Harvard Kennedy School, and then after graduating, worked at the World Bank for another year, and then just recently transitioned to a more US public sector focused consulting job. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the World Bank. I was working in the poverty and inequality global practice there for about 6 years.
Great. So hey everyone, I'm Karissa. I'm originally from Jakarta, Indonesia. I graduated from the School of Foreign Service as a Science, Technology, and International Affairs major in 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic. So throughout my time at Georgetown, I had identified pretty early on that I was interested in the world of startups and tech. I'd interned at startups both in Jakarta and in the US, just to help me decide where I wanted to work. And then actually my junior summer, I was an intern for I joined the Future Leaders in Technology program, which is by the Georgetown Tech Alliance in collaboration, I think, with Kali. And so this was a program that, connected Georgetown students interested in tech to tech companies. And most of them had like a connection to Georgetown. So in my case, I interned at an insurtech startup based in San Francisco, where the co-founders were Georgetown grads. And honestly, I didn't really expect anything out of that, because generally I think people say that, if you want to get sponsored or stay in the US, you go to a larger company that has resources to do that. But I kept in touch with the founders because, they were both Hoyas. So we had that connection. And then because of that, they had asked me to come back full time as an associate product manager at Digisure. So that's where I worked right after graduation. I moved to San Francisco for the duration of my OPT, and I worked at Digisure. And then towards the end of my OPT, they were aware of my visa situation, and they asked if I wanted to relocate to Amsterdam. So I'm still working for Digisure, but currently based out of Amsterdam.
Hi everyone, my name is Feihan, and I graduated from MSB last year in 2020, and I was a finance and open major. And I am a consultant at EY's financial service consulting practice. I went through the super standard consulting recruiting, and I was able to get an internship from my junior fall, have done my internship junior summer, and then receive a full-time offer to come back for full-time. It has been a really good experience, and happy to answer all the questions. And thank you for having me again.
Thank you all. I'm wondering if all of you could share more about how you navigated the job search as you were seeking work outside of your home country. I mean, a few of you touched on that a little bit. Also, if you could share a little bit more about your visa status. A couple of you have some kind of unique situations I think it would be helpful for students to learn about. So if you could share how you navigated the job search and then a little bit more on your visa statuses, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So I think my senior year, I was kind of applying in I'd say 3 different buckets to different jobs. One was more about think tanks that were working on Middle East policy, more policy politics kind of lane. And then another one was more econ heavy consulting. And then the third was international organizations like the World Bank. And then, from the start of the year, I, started trying to reach out to people, try to apply to jobs. But especially in the two fields that I mentioned, the more think tank and the World Bank side, and especially at the World Bank side, there wasn't like a structured pipeline of getting a job like you would in consulting companies. That starts from the fall. So I had to wait till when I contacted people, they usually told me wait till February, March, and contact us again then. So I'd say it was like helpful that I reached out to people, but in terms of actually getting a job, especially as a consultant in the World Bank, like a short-term consultant, since they open up more for project-based needs, people weren't doing hiring, from September, October to next year's May, June. So it was much more during March, April. And then, as I mentioned briefly, I just emailed a bunch of people, and I had in that class that I mentioned that I took. The class was about writing a paper using World Bank data and using Stata. So I kind of mentioned I can use Stata. I have written a paper on these issues. So that was my entry point. So I think the things that helped me was language. I knew Turkish, I knew Stata, and I had kind of these pieces, examples that I had written. So it was lucky at the end too, because the unit was looking for someone who could speak Turkish, who could use Stata, and who could write. So because at the entry level in the World Bank, you really, subject matter expertise is near impossible for someone just starting to have, right? So you have to bring these additional skills. It could be different software like R, Tableau, different stuff. Stata is still very much used. So it could be something like that. It could be language. So that's what I used. I think I got lucky. I mean, I emailed 20 people, I remember, around, and maybe 3 responded, and I met with one of them and got the offer from there. So, and by that time I got the offer, it was like 3-4 days after graduation, and I had no idea what I would do with my OPT visa starting and all of that. So I'd say, you only need one job at the end. So that happened at the end. And then on the visa situation, I was on my OPT visa for a year. And they told me, so in the World Bank, you can get a G4 visa, which is a specific international organization visa. They told me don't get it in your first year because the OPT visa is more flexible. You can switch to another job if you're unhappy in the OPT visa. Whereas if you switch to a G4 visa, then you can't work anywhere. It's much harder to you can try to switch to the IMF or something, but you can't switch to anything like US based that's not international. So I did that. I was very happy with my job. It was, like I said, it was a short-term consultant position at the beginning. Then I got a 2-year staff offer and switched to the G4 visa. But if you need to switch to the G4 visa as a short-term consultant, you also can. So there's no issues with that. And as I said, that's a visa that's quite easy to get, but you can only work in the World Bank. If you're not a US citizen, you don't pay taxes actually. So there's different conditions to it. But then I don't know what's happening now. But when I left, there was a limit that if you're on the G4 visa, you couldn't stay in the US consecutively more than 90 days straight. So you would go to Toronto every 90 days and then come back. And then as a short-term consultant, you can only work 150 business days, which translates to 6-7 months. So if you go a World Bank short-term consultant route, I'd make sure that everyone's aware of these weirdnesses that you can only work 6-7 months and you can't work in any other job in the US. You could go back to your home country for 3-4 months, do something else, and then come back. It renews every July is the new fiscal year. And then you might face these additional things of having to leave the country, going to Mexico or Canada, and then crossing back. So there's some peculiarities like that to the G4 visa if you're on a part-time short-term consultant. If you're fully staffed, then it's much more stable. You're staying the whole year, you get benefits and everything.
Great. Yeah, so my visa situation, so I kind of had a little bit of a roundabout journey. So as I mentioned, I was really interested in working in tech specifically and in product management. And so I think I focused a lot of my job search in the beginning on bigger companies, but honestly, I was just kind of applying to a lot of tech jobs, regardless of the role, just because product management as a role is quite competitive in tech, and I was just really focused on wanting to stay in the US. And honestly, it was a pretty stressful time. I definitely had a few interviews where I got to a certain stage, and then I had recruiters tell me that, oh, because of your visa situation, and the fact that your major isn't like directly related to product management, it would be really hard to secure a visa. And so it was quite difficult. And so, as I mentioned, during that time, I had maintained a relationship with the co-founders of Digisure, the company I work at, and they were both Georgetown grads. And so we kept in touch, and actually the co-founders visited DC because one of them was being awarded an alumni award. And so we had lunch, and, because of the Georgetown connection, I felt like they were looking out for me, willing to help me out. And so we were just having a conversation about the job search. I was telling them, I was struggling because of the whole visa situation. I was really interested in product management. And they had said that they just hired a new head of product, and, maybe would I consider working for them? And so I talked about, my concerns with like sponsorship and needing to handle all of those things. And so a few months later, they followed up, and basically the co-founder called me, and he was like, look, like, we really want to have you back. We know that your visa situation is complicated, and we're willing to help work that out with you. So no, like, as long as you're able to stay for the OPT, then we'll figure something out. They didn't necessarily have a very clear plan, but I think there was a little bit of a leap of faith that I had to do, but because I really liked the company, it was a role in product management, which I really wanted to do, and I had a personal relationship with the founders. I kind of just put my trust in them, and I was like, okay, well, I think I'm just gonna have to take this opportunity and see where it goes. So during my 1-year OPT, I moved to San Francisco. I worked there, and then I made sure to bring up the visa situation relatively early. My direct manager, he is also international, so he's originally British, but now has a green card. So I was also very lucky in that he was very empathetic towards the situation. And so we had discussed going the H-1B route, which is, again, like the most typical route. And so that happened, and then kind of early on, they consulted immigration lawyers, and basically the feedback that they got was, again, because of my major and because of the nature of my job, it would be difficult, even if I got the lottery, to kind of prove that there was a relationship between, like, my background and the role of the job, which is something that you have to show during the H-1B process. But they were willing to try. But they also, when around the time we were having this conversation, this was also an interesting time at the company because we had just committed to, a client in Europe, and they were thinking about, expanding internationally into Europe and into Amsterdam. And so, the other option that was provided to me was, would you be willing to live in Amsterdam for at least a year? And then we can transfer you back on an L1 visa. So basically what I was told was, like, the H-1B was really unlikely. If I really wanted to go that route, they were willing to try, but would I consider this L1? For people who don't know, the L1 visa is a different type of visa. So it's a visa specifically for multinational companies with branches abroad that for you to transfer people from the foreign branches back into the United States. And so this visa, I think, is commonly used in the tech industry particularly. And it's different to the H-1B in that, because you had that 1-year work experience, there's like less of a need to necessarily prove that I was uniquely qualified to have that job. And also because it's not the H-1B, it's not a lottery system with a cap. And so it would be a more flexible option for me. So yeah, that's essentially, like that, in addition to the fact that living in Amsterdam for a year sounded pretty cool and like a very interesting career and life opportunity, I decided to go that route. And so yeah, right now, I'm employed for the Dutch subsidiary of Digisure, and planning to work here for at least a year, and then after that, kicking off the L1 process. So happy to dive deeper into any of those details, but that's basically how I got here. So
Yeah, and I definitely relate to both Karissa and Kaan. It is super difficult for international students to get a job here in the States, but you guys are already taking the first step on coming to this session to try to learn the process, so which is already really good. And for me, my role is much more traditional than the other two since I was in the MSB, and MSB has been putting on so many great recruiting events since my freshman year. Actually, like since my first week of college, I was in the part of the pre-orientation program build, and we have been doing corporate visits. So on the first day, I was able to have the opportunity to go network with different professionals from different firms. And then beginning in my sophomore year, I started to have conscious about, okay, I need to show up to recruiting events. And when you go to Handshake, you can always see there are so many different events going on campus. I don't know if you guys are having in-person events already or still everything online. But if it's online, it's even easier. You just need to log on. And then during those events, you can just tell them, hey, I am a freshman or sophomore and super interested in learning about what it's like to be a consultant or what it's like to be an investment banker. And that's a great opportunity to build a connection. Like you don't really need to bring up the idea of you need to be sponsored. You're just there to learn what the career is about. And then once you come down to the spring semester of your sophomore year, if you are doing investment banking recruiting, or if you're or you will be fourth semester of junior year if you are doing consulting recruiting. And that's the time you start to look at the Handshake or different company website to see the requirement, like which firm sponsor and which firm who don't sponsor. It will be pretty easy filter. Like you just Google it up, and probably took me half an hour to go through different firms and then just have a list of firms which sponsor for international students. And then for those firms, I start to make sure that I call up different people from the firms just to go network with them. I remember on average, I probably have about 4 to 5 networking calls every single day for 2 months. It was definitely a stressful time, but everyone, not only international students going through this, like everyone at Georgetown is going through this. So don't feel that you are alone. And then I would say the process, like the interview process is literally the same. Like I'm in the same pool as all the domestic students. And then I got the offer and, okay, sorry. Now another thing is like the visa status. Right now I am on H-1B visa. I got super lucky to win the lottery actually before I graduate from Georgetown. So they changed the lottery policy now that as soon as you have an offer and in your senior year, you can enter into lottery in your senior year. So I got the lottery like on March 30th of 2020. So that's like when I just got sent back home from Georgetown. I was just like, okay, that's the only good news happening this year. And then the firm, like if you go to a large firm, they typically have a super good law team, and they'll just tell you what you need to hand it to them to file the H-1B application. So no worry, like as long as you follow the steps the law team asks you to do, you will be pretty easy. And then one thing I do want to bring up is I actually changed my major in my senior year. I used to be a finance and accounting double major in MSB and changed it to finance open double major. It was just because in my senior year, open major received the STEM status, and I was just thinking I need to do something to maximize my chance. And with the 3-year OPT as well, so that means like you have 3 chances to enter into the lottery, and in addition to the chance to enter into the lottery in your senior year, you pretty much has a 4 chance. And then if you look at stats, it's only like less than 1% of chance you won't win the lottery among the 4 chance. So if you do STEM, you shouldn't worry too much about it.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, like by chance, so if you have a STEM OPT, you have 3 years to work on OPT before you need to apply to H-1B. And so therefore, every year you can keep trying to get the H-1B.
Yes.
So I'm going to add, I'm going to come back to you and all of you. I'd like you to answer the question then on, because Feihan, I'm going to start with you because you were alluding to this. When do you recommend that international students share their visa status in the job search process?
I think you definitely need to be frank, and the recruiter has to know about this. So for me, like when I was interviewing with EY, the recruiter knows I need sponsorship, and initially I put New York office as my first choice. And then, but New York office doesn't sponsor for international students. Since the recruiter knows I need sponsorship, he just put me down to a DC office. So I would say before you like actually submit the button on your application, make sure to talk to recruiter and then let the recruiter know A, who you are, and B, you need sponsorship. And that in that way, you also save you so much work as well.
Thank you. What, Karissa, Kaan, would you add anything more to that?
I mean, for the World Bank, doesn't matter. I was just going to say, I'm also in the process of getting a STEM extension to my OPT right now in my new job. So if there's any questions about that, I have that hat as well. So happy to answer questions there too.
Yeah, and I would say, like, I think that you should try to tell, like, the recruiter or the hiring manager pretty early on in the process. You know, you don't necessarily have to start off a conversation saying that, but I think, you know, before you get too far into the process, you just don't want to waste your time if that is going to be a reason that a company's not going to hire you. And I think, especially in my experience with, you know, applying for smaller companies that don't have big HR or, you know, immigration resources, as an international student, you are going to have to also be very proactive in educating your hiring manager and your recruiter about what that status means, right? So like explaining, yes, like, you know, I have a 1-year OPT, or, you know, if I'm STEM, I have a 3-year OPT, and like, you know, having to do some research explaining like what options are available to you. I got pretty fortunate in that, you know, my hiring manager and my boss like went through a similar process, so he was a little bit more familiar with it. But definitely, I think, you know, being proactive about that is really important when you're applying to smaller companies that aren't as well resourced. So
thank you, everybody. Great advice. I do want to add that if you have any visa specific questions, you really want to go to OGS. And for those of you undergrads, Rebecca Hart is your contact. I will put her information in the chat so you can make an appointment with her. The other thing I wanted to put in the chat, and I'm going to send to you now, is that Feihan mentioned how he was pretty strategic about figuring out which firms hire international students at a greater rate. We have a page on our website on job searching in the US, and it lists different ways that you can find international friendly employers with My Visa Jobs. We have a list of students in the past who've gotten OPT and what companies, CPT, what companies by major. So definitely check out that website, and that can help you in terms of being strategic and finding companies that may be more willing to hire you. Okay, so my last question, and then I'd love to hear questions from the students in the audience. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently while at Georgetown? So Kaan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely wasn't, you know, very intentional thinking about it, about like the job search and, you know, the best ways of getting a job after graduation. I wasn't thinking about that until my beginning of my senior year, probably, which was a bit late, especially for international students. So, but I think everyone who's on this call is doing better than I was, for sure. And I think the internships tend to be a pretty solid way of securing future job opportunities, and also just trying out the right internships to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And sometimes figuring out something that's not appealing for you is more important than the other way around, I've found. So I think I could have, started thinking about it intentionally a bit earlier. I could have used my internships a little better, although I did figure out what I didn't like through the internship, so that was helpful. And then I think the final thing was that I just wasn't too intentional, and I think Feihan mentioned this. I also wasn't too intentional about the STEM extension as well. So if in a way that's not very difficult for you, that you can qualify for a STEM extension, I think H1, it makes H1B much more likely, but also it makes it, I think, much more secure for someone to hire you, knowing that you have a good chance of staying there 3 years versus 1 year. So I think, again, I wouldn't want to push on anyone to say definitely do STEM and stuff like that. But if you're on the borderline and if it wouldn't be too hard, I think that would be helpful as well. And then I guess this is not the question, but one thing I think that got me the job was reaching out to people that I didn't even know. So I'd say probably starting that even earlier, just being okay sending emails to people. The worst thing is they don't reply, and then you're at least as well off as you were before sending the email, right? So there's really no downside. So I think that would be one thing I would recommend, especially for a place like the World Bank, where it's not very structured for people coming out of undergrad to get a job.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. So, I think something to take away from my story is truly the power of the relationships that you have with people, particularly leveraging the Georgetown connection. So in my experience, particularly for tech specifically, but I'm sure across all industries, because tech is more of an underrepresented career, although it is becoming more popular at Georgetown, I found that when I reached out to people in the industry, they were always really willing to talk to me and to help me, even if they're not still giving me a referral, just helping me navigate the process. And specifically what I did was I looked at tech companies that I liked, and then I tried to find international students that worked at those companies, because then I would know that it was likely that those people had to have some sort of way to be able to work at that company. So that's really useful. And again, the way that I got my job was I maintained a relationship with the co-founder of the company. And because of that, even though it was a smaller company and they weren't as well resourced, they were still willing to put in that work for me and to, make that effort for me. So I think definitely leveraging the Georgetown connection is something really, really important, and something that I wish I had focused on, even starting from junior year. I think the second thing is, being a little bit open-minded and flexible in terms of the path that can take you there, I think is really important. So for example, obviously everyone has their different paths. For me, I worked at small startups, and I didn't necessarily have the expectation that I would get a return offer from those companies. It was more as a way for me to learn what I like and leverage those experiences to apply for the next job. But even because I was open to that and not necessarily just working at big tech companies with very clear pipelines, I'm able to have the opportunity that I have now. And even currently, when I was in college, I was so focused about staying in the US, getting the H1B, and then, at my current job, getting this opportunity to move to Europe, that was never something that was even on my radar. But I think because I was open to the opportunity and able to take it, then that opened up more doors for me. So I know that there's a conventional path that people often follow at Georgetown, and especially in fields such as finance and consulting. And I think those are definitely viable options. But just because those, aren't something that you're interested in, or that's not working out for you, it doesn't mean that you're not able to do that. So just being open to any opportunities that come your way and being a little bit more flexible in the path that will take you there. And then finally, I think not feeling like being an international student defined my career search process was really important. It was really difficult, right? And it feels like a huge barrier that you have this visa status that will have people not even consider you for jobs. And it's hard not to feel like being an international student is an impediment in the job search. But I think, making sure to highlight the fact that, the fact that you had to adapt to a new culture, that you're resilient, the fact that you have to go through all these loopholes means that, you just are a resilient person. That is something that will take you far in the job search. And, even like for me, like moving to Europe and being able to take on this new responsibility, adapting to a new culture, like the fact that I am an international student and I had to go through all of those barriers was something that helped me in my career today. So like, it's just really important to remember that being an international student has a lot of strengths and advantages, and it's not just impeding you from looking for a job.
Yeah, definitely echo everything has been said. And then I would just add, I guess like from from recruiting perspective, I will probably do more research before I start to talk to people. Like, and it's actually really easy. You can just like go to YouTube and then search what is product management, what is consulting, what is investment banking, and or like whatever the position you want to go for, and then watch like a quick 10-20 minutes video, and then go have a call with people. In that way, people will know you actually have done research. I know back when I was calling people in my sophomore year and junior year, I was just asking them, okay, what is consulting? It's like, it's really big. And then clear that person know you haven't done any research, and that won't impress people, especially given you are asking for sponsorship. So I would say A, do more research before you connect with people. And B, I would say take more technical classes at Georgetown. That's one thing I can't regret. I only took one computer science class, is Intro to Computer Science, in my senior year. And I know now technology is in everything. And so it's better to have more technical background in your pocket, and it can be used at the workforce. And then I guess the last one, just enjoy it, because college is so short. And then Karissa and I, we graduated last year. So I thought we'll have a fun senior spring, but it got cut and short. So definitely enjoy these 4 years, and they won't be back, and you'll miss it a lot.
This is all great advice. Yes. And I really like to what all of you said, and also what Karissa was saying about understanding the strengths that you bring to this job search, because Feihan, you've been very strategic, and I'm going to switch to OPM and take technology, and all those are really smart things and something to think about, but it also is a lot of pressure on yourself. So to think about all the strengths you bring and remember that when you're meeting with employers as well. Okay, well, that is all the questions that I have. So what other questions do people have? So I'll ask one more question while others are thinking. Karissa, you mentioned that you would try to find international alums that were at these companies. So, we all know that you all have, less social capital in the US. And so I'm wondering where you looked. How did you find some of those people to connect with? And
yeah, I did a lot of LinkedIn stalking. Honestly, LinkedIn was probably like the #1 source. And so I would filter, I would look up like different companies that I was interested in, and then look at the people that were from Georgetown. And a lot of the times, like the companies I applied for were kind of like more mid-sized. And then, I would kind of just look at a bunch of profiles, and you can try to basically discern if someone is an international student or not. Another thing that I looked at was Hoya Gateway. Is it Hoya Gateway? So at Hoya Gateway, you can actually filter by people who are international or not, and then by industry. And also I found that helpful. And so those two sources, and Hoya Gateway, it's nice because they actually like disclose whether they're international, whereas like on LinkedIn, sometimes you kind of have to like assume based on where people went to high school, and obviously you don't know what their visa status was and everything, but I also definitely got some matches that way.
Yes, exactly. There is a little glitch right now with Hoya Gateway, but that will get fixed. And essentially you can put in the, were you once an international student on an F1 visa? And if it's yes, then you will pull up alums, and that will help your search. Thank you, Karissa. Any other from the panelists? Any other ways?
Yeah, I was adding, like, definitely get to know people who are in your clubs, because Georgetown, I know Georgetown is famous for the club culture, sometimes can be a little bit too toxic, but people who are in your club are a great resource. If you have a good relationship with like people who are 2 or 3 years older than you in your club, and that person can be a great advocate for you when you are applying to different jobs.
Yeah, and specifically on the World Bank, what I had done was, World Bank publishes like thousands of reports every year. So I remember looking at reports that were either in Turkey or neighboring countries and topics that I was especially interested in, and then identifying the authors and then reaching out to them via email. I mean, if you do enough digging, you can find most people's emails online. It's not always possible, but it's generally you can. And then a little trick with the World Bank is it's usually the first letter of their first name and then their last name. If you can't find it, you can just send it to that and then see if it works. But yeah, that's how I was identifying people to email from reports that I thought I could, contribute to similar pieces of work to those reports. That's how I was reaching out.
You all have definitely been resourceful in your search and finding people. It's great. So there's a question for Feihan. What were you going to do differently if you didn't get the H-1B right away?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I was pretty strategic when I was in college. So I took the GMAT back in my junior year, and then I know I want to go to MBA in the future. So different MBA program, they have different MBA program. So I applied in my senior year, and I have an offer in my bag. So I know if I didn't get the H-1B after STEM OPT, I'll just go back to school.